It's one of the most asked questions in this sport. How do you actually get a job in Formula One? Simple question, genuinely complicated answer, because in 2026, there isn't just one way in. Here's the direct answer. The 11 teams alone employ somewhere around 11 to 1,200 people trackside every single race weekend. But that's only the teams. Count everyone else who works a Grand Prix, Pirelli's engineers, hospitality staff, the FIA, FOM, and the media pack. And the real number on site climbs to around 2,500 people. At a marshal-heavy race like Singapore, where over 1,100 volunteer race officials alone are deployed, that number can push past 3,000. And at the very bottom of that pyramid, according to sourcing from inside the paddock, some entry-level day hire roles pay as little as €100 a day. While at the very top, senior roles reach into the tens of millions. Every one of those roles has a different door in. Some need an engineering degree, some need a trade qualification. And some, frankly, need none of that at all. We're able to tell you that because we, at the Motion Report, are trackside every single race weekend, talking to the real people who actually know. This episode is the map. Over the rest of this series, we zoom into each individual role. Let's get into it. The scale of the paddock. Each race weekend, somewhere in this paddock, an hourly paid hospitality worker is plating lunch for a celebrity guest. 30 feet away, a mechanic is torquing a wheel nut to the exact Newton meter spec. And somewhere above both of them, a team principal, answering to the team's owners, is deciding whether to spend $17 million a year on himself, while negotiating a driver's contract that could pay out $50 million or more. Same paddock, same race weekend, same sport. Before we get into numbers, it helps to know who's actually out there. Every race weekend trackside, you've got 4 core groups, the teams themselves and Pirelli. The FIA running race control and scrutineering. FOM running the commercial and broadcast side, and the media. Over 100 accredited photographers, journalists, and broadcasters. There's a 5th group worth mentioning. The host circuit's own marshals and volunteers, since they're only at 1 race a year, while everyone else on this list is at all 24. Each team brings roughly 96 to 100 people to the racetrack, fully registered under the cost cap. Multiply that across the grid, and you're already at around 1,100 people before anyone else even walks through the gate. Add to that the jobs that sit trackside but fall outside the cost cap entirely, catering and hospitality staff, and the other support roles each team brings with them. And that number climbs higher still. Within that huge group, there are several categories of job titles, each with different tasks, entry paths, and salaries. That's exactly what we go through one by one for the rest of this series. Why we're using Cadillac as the case study. Here's what makes this series different from a generic salary breakdown. We're not talking in the abstract. We're using one real team, all season, as our running case study, Cadillac. Why Cadillac? Because it's the only team on the grid that had to build its entire structure from absolute zero on a deadline to make the first race in Melbourne. That started at the top with Graham Lowden brought in as team principal before Cadillac was even officially approved to join the grid, and continued as recently as this February with Mark Heinz hired as chief racing officer to align the driver program and engineering group in time for the season opener. Every other team on the grid inherited decades of staff and infrastructure. Cadillac had none of that. And by their own hiring activity, they're still adding people right now, mid-season, with reports they've successfully poached Red Bull's own chief engineer for car engineering, Paul Monahan, after 2 decades at that team. They're doing all of this under exactly the same $215 million cost cap every other team operates under, which makes Cadillac's hiring spree one of the most transparent windows into what it actually costs to build an F1 team, person by person in real time. Chapter 3. The floor of the pyramid. Start at the floor. Hospitality and catering staff, outside the cost cap entirely, are typically paid $30 to $35 an hour. No bonus structure. Just an hourly rate and decent accommodation included, which isn't nothing for a weekend in Monaco or Singapore. One level up, entry-level garage technicians and factory mechanics, realistically $45,000 to $95,000 a year, in some cases paid by the day, according to paddock sourcing, as low as €100. Trackside race mechanics sit a little higher, and a number 1 mechanic can push toward $110,000. Still a real salary, still nowhere near what most fans assume an F1 job pays, but this career doesn't have a ceiling where you'd expect it to. Take Callum Nicholas, 15 years as a race mechanic, 13 F1 seasons, 4 drivers' championships working on Max Verstappen's side of the Red Bull garage. When he hung up his race suit, he became a content creator and author, and today he's a Red Bull Racing ambassador with a following most journalists in this paddock would envy. Sometimes the mechanic becomes the storyteller. Chapter 4. The Middle. Move up again, and you hit the roles that actually decide races. Race engineers, the voice a driver hears in his ear every lap, typically earn somewhere in the region of $115,000 to $135,000, with top team veterans pushing past $165,000. Strategists, the people making the pit call decisions fans argue about for days afterward, sit in a similar band. But there's a newer category living in this same middle layer, and it barely existed in this form a decade ago: data and software. Every team now runs a dedicated bench of performance data analysts, simulation engineers, and software engineers, processing the tens of thousands of data points a modern F1 car generates every single lap. At the entry end, factory-based data analysts supporting race engineers with reports and simulation work typically start in the $30,000 to $80,000 range. Specialist software engineers building the tools that process all of that telemetry cite meaningfully higher. At a team like Mercedes, software engineering roles have been reported averaging around $149,000 a year, with senior specialists reported earning well over $200,000. This is the layer where a single decision, one pit stop, one tire call, one simulation run days before the weekend even starts, can be worth more to the team than that person's entire annual salary. The team outside the garage. Not every job in this pyramid touches the car at all. Walk away from the garage into hospitality and the paddock club, and you find a whole second team running in parallel, the one that makes the sport function as a business, not just a race. Start with content. Every team now runs its own social media unit, camera operators, editors, and producers capturing footage the second a driver steps out of the motorhome. At Cadillac, that's led by Shyam Rajdev, head of content. It's a job category that barely existed a decade ago, built almost entirely around F1's recent explosion in global reach. Then there's PR, press officers manage media schedules and train drivers on how to answer questions before they're even asked. At Cadillac, that runs through Lucy Jenner, Vice President and Head of Communications, with Connor Bean and India de la Fressange as communications managers beneath her. And before any hospitality matters, someone has to land the sponsor in the first place. At Cadillac, that's Tyler Epp and Willem Dinger, running commercial strategy and partnerships, arguably one of the few places left where a team can genuinely outspend its rivals, now that the cost cap limits what they can spend on the car itself. All of these people may never touch a car on any given day, but they're essential to how a modern F1 team actually runs. Chapter 6. The Top. Now the jobs everyone actually clicked for. The very top of the F1 team pyramid. Team principals range from roughly $1 million a year at the low end, where Cadillac's Graham Lowden likely sits in his first season, up to $17 million for the most senior operators. Toto Wolff isn't just salaried, he holds an ownership stake in his own team. Cadillac's chain of command is unusually short. Lowden answers directly to Dan Torres, CEO of TWG Motorsports, who answers to ownership itself. And there's F1 royalty in that structure too. Mario Andretti, 1978 world champion, sits on Cadillac's board, while his son Michael, whose own F1 bid became this team, remains on as an advisor. Here's the twist worth remembering. Lowden and his chief racing officer Mark Heinz co-founded a driver management company together years before Cadillac existed, and jointly managed Zhou Guanyu, now Cadillac's reserve driver. The same two men who managed his career from the outside are now his bosses on the inside. At the very top, drivers, $1 to $2 million for rookies, $5 to $15 for the mid-grid, $50 to $75 million for the very best. Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas are estimated around $8 million and $5 million, respectively, at Cadillac. Both driver pay and the top 3 highest paid staff at any team sit entirely outside the cost cap. A rule that applies to Cadillac too, once they're fully up to speed. So that's the shape of it, a lot to process, but also a multitude of opportunities if working trackside at a real F1 race is the dream. Over the rest of this series, we're going through the key positions one at a time, what the job actually is, what it actually pays at the current market rate, and exactly how someone gets hired into it, unless you are the son of a billionaire investor. And as I mentioned at the beginning, because we're trackside, we talk to the people who should know and can give real advice. So buckle up and take notes, tell us in the comments which job you want us to break down first, and subscribe because this series has a long way to go. Thanks for watching.